The following program is a production of Pioneer Public Television.
Hello and welcome to Compass. I'm Les Heen, your host for Compass, and this is a special edition of Compass because it's the 1 year since we started this program. Compass was a new production for Pioneer Public Television, a public affairs program that we wanted to do for a long time. And this marks the beginning not only of our second year of the show, but also our first broadcast in prime time. In addition to the 12:30 slot, which we've had for the past year, we're also running it now on Thursday nights at 9 o'clock. So thank you for joining us. As part of this year-end anniversary of the program, I have with me Laura Prosser, attended the University of Minnesota Duluth, and then you worked at newspapers in Mississippi and in Clara City, correct?
Correct. Small-town newspapers, so all these issues we cover are ones I'm very familiar with.
Yes, and of course, people who watch Compass every week have seen you on the road doing stories, but you know, the idea here is to go over some of the past year in review, look at some stories we had. There have been some interesting things that have happened and some follow-ups, and then we also look a little bit at 2017 and a special feature we have on authors, so lots to cover.
A lot to cover and a lot to get through in just 20 minutes.
Yeah. So let's start with some of the stories first, all that we talked about in 2016 and some follow-up. I know, Laura, one of the ones that you talked about was the hospital in Milbank, South Dakota. What's happened with that story since you reported on that?
Now, this is a recently aired episode that since we last talked to them in December 12th, they have moved into the new building across town, and due to recent severe weather that we have been experiencing, they actually got to test out their new generators within the first couple days. Okay. According to Natalie, it was an interesting initiation.
Sure. So a bit of a rough start, but you know, because of the weather, but they obviously got through it.
Exactly. So. You know, the site has already delivered its first baby. It's had its first emergency response, which was a cardiac issue. You know, and now as part of the new service, they have in-house pharmacy, which has a drive-by window as well as you can leave the clinic and come right through. It's the Bean Pharmacy, which was from town and moved into the hospital. So they're seeing actually more inpatients just walk in.
Great. So good news for the folks in Milbank, South Dakota and their new hospital. From Milbank, the next one on our list is the teacher shortage, something that of course affects a lot of schools all over rural America.
Well, and what we're finding is it's not just rural areas anymore. It's metro areas as well that are struggling. It's reached a crisis basis, and according to Michelle Beach, who we had last year, it's still based on a slow growth in the Minnesota workforce to not as many kids going into an education degree, to even, you know, baby boomers are retiring and there's not enough people to fill their situations. So we sit there and we're going, what is going on? What are we going to do about it? Well, there has been, the Minnesota Department of Education and the Minnesota Associate of Rural Educators who have examined this issue in depth and who have addressed reasons and suggested solutions in a published report, as well as the 2016 Minnesota legislature has 9 proposed bills just for, you know, retention and recruitment for teacher shortages.
And we'll keep an eye on what happens to those in 2017, of course.
Of course.
Okay.
So now another thing that we're covering is the World War I traveling exhibit. Now, This is something that we reported that it was supposed to launch in 2017. Mm-hmm. Well, they hit a few snafus, and stage 2, which was what they were in the middle of when we last talked to them, was hiring and getting a grant for $10,000 to hire Musology to create an exhibit plan, which they have done. They have the plan completely finished. They know that there are going to be 5 contexts or 5 exhibits within the traveling exhibit itself, including a section called Heed the Call, Life as a Soldier, How War Affected the Home Front Services, and Returning Home from War. So this is the 5 contexts that are within the overall exhibit, which will cover 10 counties: Big Stone, Chippewa, Candy, Ojai, Lackaparro, Lincoln, Lyon, Redwood, Renville, Swift, and Yellow Medicine.
So southwest, west central Minnesota.
Yes, and so because it was a little bit of a time constraint, and because the Minnesota Historical Society is having their own World War I exhibit in 2017, these 10 counties decided to hold off and wait until 2018 to launch their exhibit. Okay. The next step is to apply for another grant, which will be for the content writing of all these exhibits.
Okay, great. And from there, of course, we have another traveling exhibit we talked about in the past, was the water exhibit.
Yes, the waterways. We Are Water Minnesota, which started out in New London.
Yes, started out in New London, and the latest there is that traveling exhibit has continued to go throughout the state. It's been in Lanesboro, I believe, and Red Wing and Sandstone, and it's going from place to place. And this is a partnership between the Minnesota Humanities Center and the Smithsonian. And as a matter of clarification or disclosure, I'm on the board of the Humanities Center. Happy to be working on this project and see it, come to this point. It's coming up in Detroit Lakes. That'll be at the Becker County Historical Society, and that's coming up from February 25th to April 9th. So if anyone has not seen it yet and you're in Detroit Lakes, there's a chance to see the water exhibit still making its way around the state.
Well, and they just opened in Lanesboro this week. Right. January 7th they opened, and they see over 1,000 attendees in each place, which is amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's, the fact that it's been to a number of cities gives people an opportunity if they've missed it in other places. As I said, Detroit Lakes coming up February 25th. So
well, and a huge part of the draw too for it is these counties that are hosting it, the societies and stuff, they have events based around the exhibit. So case in point, you look at just in the Prairie Woods Arts Center, they had the Okie Dokie Brothers come and play a concert.
And that was in New London?
That was in New London, yes. In the Nicollet Center, they had a new permanent exhibit built around this for the Nicollet County. Goodhue had a river cleanup and some 20 other events. So they're really working to promote it, not just at a local level, but overall to keep the exhibit as something of interest for everybody.
Right. I should mention too, it's the Becker County Historical Society in Detroit Lakes where the exhibit will be February 25th to April 9th.
Yes, and they are also starting phase 2, which means they are looking for partners to help build the capacity for training and for resource engagement within these host communities. So they're looking to even expand the exhibits in these host communities more than they've already been expanded.
Well, we did a lot of stories in the past year about water and the environment, so this provides us a transition to talk about some of the environment and natural resource stories. And I know, Laura, we wanted to talk about these in part because there are a number of follow-ups on these that we can talk about. Should we start with Marsh Lake?
Of course. Sure. So since we last talked to them this last summer or spring, Marsh Lake has constructed and received funds. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has moved full speed to finalize their design, and the construction was finally awarded. So it was contracted in September to RTS Shearing LLC in Jamestown, North Dakota. Now, the project is expected to take 2 years to complete and is going to be about $9.4 million.
And we should mention for our viewers who did not see the original story, Marsh Lake is an area of the upper Minnesota River Valley. It's right near Lackaparro, so it's in that same vicinity, not very far from where our studios are in Appleton, Minnesota. And this has been a dream for quite some time to have this project, at least for the people who are concerned about the natural and the original watercourse versus the watercourse has been affected by the Marsh Lake Dam. So this has been in the discussion phase for a very long time.
And the discussion has gravitated around the Pomme de Terre River. Yeah. So the groundbreaking was set to do in November. However, due to weather, it was postponed. So as we're jumping from Marsh Lake right now to the One Watershed, One Plan, In 2014, in the One Watershed, One Plan, there was 5 pilot programs, and now there are 7 new planning areas, including the Pomme de Terre River, Lake of the Woods, Thief River, Leech Lake, the Missouri River Basin, Cannon, and Cedar as well. But of the 5 that were named in 2014, yes, 2 have been approved. They completed their plans and they had submitted it to the Board of Water, Soil, and Water Resource offices, and they approved the Root River and the Yellow Medicine plans.
Yes, and the Root River is in extreme southeastern Minnesota, the area around Lanesboro, Rushford, that area, and the Yellow Medicine River is in the western side of the state, Yellow Medicine County primarily.
Correct. And for Root River, their plan...
Drinking water and streams, that's going to be part
of
it?
Yep, drinking water, stream, and river health, and so much more. And then the Yellow Medicine will focus on minimizing floods, improving water quality through sediment and nutrient reduction, as well as protecting groundwater. So each plan has their own prioritization of issues based on the area and the watershed that they are covering.
And I know the news broke about the One Watershed, One Plan approval in those counties, I think just in the last couple of weeks. So that's pretty new, and we'll keep an eye on what's going there in 2017.
That's very true. And Lake Superior Comprehensive Watershed Management Plan, as well as the Red Lake River, are another one of those 5 pilots that are very close to completing their plans and getting approval.
Great. So next from here, Laura, I suppose we should move to buffer strips, because this was an area where lots of folks talked about in the past session. And buffer strips got a lot of attention, of course, in the 2015 legislative session. And we had some folks talking about it a little more in 2016. And the buffer strip issue started with Governor Dayton a couple of years ago, saying that he was interested in having 50-foot buffer strips. That's where the idea really started to take off. There was a lot of back and forth in legislation. We had an episode on it, and since that time, the governor has also organized a water summit. There was one in St. Paul, which happened about a year ago, and now, just in the last few weeks, we know that the governor has announced a rural water summit, and this one's going to be at the University of Minnesota Morris on Friday, January 27th, and the registration, I believe, has just opened. So at the University of Minnesota Morris, 9:45 to 4 p.m., registration open to the public. And again, that's happening on Friday, January 27th.
Well, and over the next 12 months, as of this last August, Governor Dayton called this year the Year of Water Action in Minnesota. So every month there's a new theme, from conserve, protect, clean, and enjoy, to challenges and solutions, to even in December we had winter ways to take action. Not to mention they also have themes like impact on climate change.
Right, and we should mention that there is a website. If folks want to learn more about the upcoming water summit, it's mn.gov/governor/water action. So that's how folks can learn more about the water summit.
Well, and the summer was huge for action for water quality issues, including in July in 2016. There was an executive order made by Governor Dayton on the issue of pollinators.
Yes.
Les, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. We had an episode where we talked with Minnesota Ag Commissioner Dave Frederickson, for example, as you're talking about pollinators and what's happening with pollinators. There's been a lot of attention paid to this because there's a lot of concern about what's going to happen with bee populations in Minnesota. There's been some discussions on everything from spontaneous colony die-off to the impact of neonicotinoids, and a lot of discussion here because, of course, there are a lot of people in agriculture who rely on bee colonies and successful pollination. So there has been a lot of attention paid on this. And this is a big deal because the estimated value of honey bee pollination for food, we're talking about a $17 billion business if you look over a wide region. And there are a lot of different reasons, and there's a lot of research going on. But one of the latest is that the governor has nominated a committee on pollinators. It's going to be 15 members, and that's going to be for statewide collaboration, raising public awareness, doing a lot to take a look at how should this problem be addressed, because the neonicotinoid issue is just one of that, one piece of that issue, but there's a lot more that I think we can look for in 2017, a lot more discussion on this issue.
Well, and what amazes me about this issue is the governor was more than willing to also include the new building plans for the Capitol in these pollinator executive orders.
Yeah, through the idea of having a pollinator-friendly mix, so you'd have the right kind of flowers and such around the Capitol to help encourage pollinators.
Exactly. So he's sitting there telling us, we need to focus on water quality, and it's not just him. It's the entire Capitol that's doing it. It's the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, the Minnesota Transportation Department. All the departments are involved.
Yeah. And I should say that, over the past of the course year, these are just a few of the issues we covered. I know we did more than 30 episodes, and we've got another 20 planned for 2017. But these are some of the issues where we know that we're likely to see some action in 2017. And there were some action steps taken in 2016. Laura, with the last few minutes that we have left in this program, I'd like to talk about some other things that we may be looking forward to in 2017. And one of those is more action, I should say, on broadband.
That's very true. We actually, looking ahead in Season 2, are talking about telemedicine. Now, back in Season 1, we had an entire episode on broadband. Discussing everything from challenges in rural areas to solutions to programs like the NEON program in Nobles County, who created different hot spots across their county to better serve the unserved or underserved communities in their region.
Yeah, and of course, broadband, of course, is one of those issues where a few years ago people weren't entirely sure how important broadband was, but now as we look at business expansion, business development, where businesses decide to move, where they can be established, people who want to do home-based businesses, broadband is critical. So, there's going to be a lot more attention paid to it. Of course, we're looking at, defining definitions of speeds, because for a lot of people it's not just about the download speed, it's also about the upload speeds, and having comparability for uploads and downloads. And as you mentioned, telemedicine, huge issue, because you have to have good broadband in order to effectively do telemedicine in rural areas.
Well, and they've set new goals. As of this last year, they've set goals for
100 megabits and 20, right?
And then, they've set that for 2015 was the 10 and 5, and now the new speed goals are 25 and 3 by 2022 and 120 by 2026.
And certainly some areas, have that and a lot more, but then it's talking about the areas, as you said, that are unserved or underserved and seeing if we can put a floor up under them.
Well, and I think we're going to see a lot more programs coming out, especially with the new grant funding that broadband is receiving from the government.
And so as we close out this edition of Compass and start out 2017, we're going to add something new, and I know this is something that you're very excited about.
I am. Okay, so as an English major and a journalism major, I am a self-proclaimed lit nerd, just a little bit. And so for the past couple of years, I haven't been able to get a book off my shelf. Dust has been collecting, to say the least. But now I finally get to invite local authors from our region, both Minnesota, the parts of the Dakotas, and Iowa, come in and we get to talk about their books. So I'm talking to local authors about poetry, about crime, about their own memoirs. And our audience members get to explore the local authors with me and their different writing styles, along with the different publication techniques that are available out in western Minnesota and the rural areas of the state. So it's something that people can tune into, and does my heart good to get back into the books.
I know you've loved it, and I saw a few of the interviews earlier, so it's going to be great fun. So thanks for sharing it. Thanks, Laura. And before we go on to the Compass Literature Corner in a moment, here's a reminder that if you have a story idea for Compass, please feel free to share it with us by sending it to the email address for Pioneer. That is yourtv@pioneer.org. With that, we hope you've enjoyed this episode of Compass, and you'll have time to spend many more Compass episodes with us throughout 2017. And here's Laura with the first installment of the Compass Literature Corner.
As part of a new segment to the show called the Compass Literature Corner, we will be talking to local authors and writers who have had an impact on this region or whom this region has had an impact on. This week's guest is a man whose mind recreates the world of Bakken, South Dakota, or even Duluth, Minnesota, into a nitty-gritty crime thriller. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to say today's guest is Southwest Minnesota State University English director and author, Anthony Neal Smith. Anthony, Neil, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me.
So tell me a little bit about what started you writing more of a noir theme.
I think I've liked them ever since I read my first Hardy Boys books in the second grade. And the covers were always these two guys in danger. The first one I ever read, they were in a small Cessna that was about to crash into the ocean, and I just had to know what was next. So I was just drawn to those mystery and crime novels with the titles that had blood and darkness and danger all in them. And it was just something that I kept as I grew up. I always loved reading hard crime novels, just an escape, I think. I'm also kind of a nervous, shy, scared guy, so it's sort of an escape without the fear of real danger as well.
Well, and as you stated before we started, your books don't necessarily have happy endings. They have more realistic endings, correct?
They're pretty bleak. They are pretty bleak. My wife hates all of my endings, so I know that I'm doing it right if she doesn't like the ending, because there's not a lot of happiness. There's usually some sort of consequence or
Some type of crime, some type of corruption.
something that's going to end up putting our character in a worse place than they started.
So in your most recently published book, Worm, you show a side of the oil rush that many people might not have wanted to write home about. They may have glossed over when they wrote home. So why tell that side of the oil rush?
It's the side that I think you see in a lot of newspapers, and if you look around, you'll find info about the strip clubs and how Williston, North Dakota became the stripper capital of the world for a short while, with dancers who would usually go to Las Vegas going to Williston instead. I think they've closed a couple of those places now, but for a while, it was just a place where if you had a lot of men there, you ended up having crime, you ended up having drugs, you ended up having problems with men treating women in awful ways. And that's just the side of the growth, because Williston was growing and booming and there's a lot of money there, but it happened so fast, all this stuff just came down on them too, and they didn't really know how to handle it.
Well, and if you didn't know the date or the setting, you could almost say it was reminiscent of the gold rush, when all the cowboys went out west and took over basically the saloons, and everything else is what you're writing about here, only nowadays.
Oh yeah, any boom town just seems to have the same rise and fall. On the very dark side. What's funny about that, I think, is that they say, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it, and yet we know this history, and we're always doomed to repeat it anyway.
Well, and these are all places you visited, correct?
Yep.
So what kind of research goes into not just the town, but the setting, the corruption, the stuff you're writing about in your book? What kind of research goes into that?
Not as much. One of our favorite things as writers is an answer Dennis Lehane gave to a question. They said, "How much research do you do?" And he said, 5 minutes on Google. And I don't do that. If I don't think I know a place well enough, even places I haven't been, because there's only been 2 that I've written about where I just haven't been there. If I didn't think I could do it, I wouldn't write it. I would feel just exposed, and someone's going to call me a fraud. So, like, for example, I couldn't go out to the Bakken, unfortunately, but my character is from Mobile, Alabama, which I know because I'm originally from Mississippi, and I know that area of the Gulf Coast. So the research I did, because when someone said, think about writing about the Bakken, for me, the best research was watching YouTube videos of guys working out there, just pouring their hearts into these videos, telling other people, if you're going to come, here's what you got to know, here's the reality of the situation. Or truckers who were taping this at 4 in the morning on the road, showing you what it's like. So that was the moment I knew after watching a few hours of those guys that I could write it. I could try to emulate what they're feeling.
Write what you know.
Yeah. Well, write what you know. Write what you're interested in, and the answer to usually write what you know, because my problem with a lot of literary fiction is that it's all about writers. Writers are the main characters, and I just can't imagine, since I do write, that being that interesting. So my thing is, in that case, no more. Go find out about things that you don't know about and write about those too, rather than just always writing about the same things in this sort of limited pot of soup that you have.
So after years of publishing short stories and now a few tries into the more long form of writing, what made you decide to tackle a book series in your upcoming 2017 release, Castle Danger, Woman on Ice?
Yeah, that's the first of two. I'm not sure if there'll be a third, but I hope so. I love book series. Some of my favorite authors write crime series, like our own John Sanford, James Lee Burke. I just read a ton of crime series and have grown up on them. So I always looked for a character or characters that I could tell more stories about. I wanted to see this stretch. I wanted to see their lives change and it not just be a one and done situation like several I've written. I've written a few books about a guy named Billy Lafitte that's like that. And then when it came time for Woman on Ice, I was really looking for a character that I felt comfortable with. And this guy Manny, the former cop, who I'm not sure how much I want to give away right now, but took a while to gestate and finally became someone I felt very strong urge to tell this story with. Manny was not originally in my head transsexual, but the more that the story came about, it just made sense. You know, he had, I don't want to give a lot away, but there was a farm accident that might not have been so accidental, and he was just struggling with his identity for a long time. Now, I don't know tons about that, but it always comes to me in a character. If a character just sparks and is interesting, then I'll go learn about, more about a particular subject. So I'm a straight white guy, but I'm an LGBT ally, and so it's really just trying to get into the skin of someone who's not like you is, I think, a part of the job of being a writer, mimicking, other voices. And with Manny's, I said, again, if I didn't think I could have done it well, then I wouldn't have done it. And at the same time, there's fear of just getting it all wrong constantly. But it was worth taking the risk. And, as I journey through books with Manny, I'm seeing her as eventually she'll become, even though she keeps the name Manny, she becomes, a woman, and I get to see that change as it happens.
Well, if you want to pick up your 2016 book, Worm, or wait until 2017 for Woman on Ice, where can they find your books?
Amazon has always been good to me for books, but if you're in Minnesota, there's a little shop called Once Upon a Crime. But you can go into any bookshop, and I would hope you would, and demand that they carry my paperbacks. That would be great. They're available everywhere.
Well, tune in for the first installment of Woman on Ice in 2017. That's it for us in the Literature Corner. Please tune in next week for more people, places, and issues facing our viewing area. I'm Pioneer's Laura K. Prosser, and may your compass always point you in the direction of a good book.